Yes, very accurate.
Ndonawo. Ndonami. Ekason. I need to learn how to speak Koromante or Sranan or something. How would I greet at this time of the day? Fawaka.
It means how are you?
Fawaka. Can I use, is it the same for plural?
I don't know. Yeah, I think you can.
Okay, Fawaka. Okay. Fawaka. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
like, waka, like walking.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's Ranan.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
nice.
Fawaka.
I'm just wondering, will class end
Early. Yeah, so we're going for about an hour and a half to 3:30, and then we'll go over for the talk. And if we don't get through everything, which we probably won't, then we'll pick up next class, the beginning with this, and just continue. So we have a visitor today. This is Dr. Olusegun Morakinyo, who's visiting us from South Africa by way of Nigeria. All right, so today we are dealing with divinity and nature. We'll try to move. I did get your paper, and I actually just read it before coming to class. And you were asking, did I think that the style of writing was okay? I thought it was good. It was connected to what we were dealing with, but it was personal at the same time. So,
That's okay.
yeah, that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine. Yeah. If it's I went to the market and bought this and this, then all right. But it was, of course, linked to what we were dealing with. So, that's definitely fine. All right. So today we're dealing with divinity and nature. Does this look familiar? I think we talked about something.
Yeah.
This
This
is,
is probably a specific one.
yeah, so this is Nkisi, the plural is Minkisi. This is the type that you find in Congo, where each one has a significance. This is an interpretation of Orisha. Somebody did like a photo series where, art, this is what I think the Orisha looked like. That's what it came out with. And then this is the first Holy Trinity, so Asar, Alset, and Heru. All right. So we'll deal with this in terms of relationships. Relationships to divinity are relationships of the person to earth, supreme being, and forces inherent in nature. There's an ontological understanding necessary to understand these relationships. And all this is, of course, going to tie back to what we've already discussed, the multiple aspects of the self, destiny, divination, and things of that nature as well. So these are all the relationships. How do the Orisha or Abosom or Vodunsi, what do they have to do with my destiny and things of that nature? Also, there are analogies between the person and the universe in African thought, and that's what we'll deal with. So we'll start off dealing with creation accounts. So this is Nun and Naunet, right? So we'll come into what we're dealing with, but it's basically dealing with the primordial waters. So in the beginning, in various African traditions, there was water, endless water. Among the Yoruba, it's like that. In ancient Kemet, it's like that, and many others. So in African creation accounts, there's a primeval or primordial water, which we could look at as a metaphor for the womb. This is seen to be a life force which permeates everything. And there's an idea that everything evolved from this original material. Now, interestingly enough, if you read so-called scientific accounts of the Big Bang, which you find that same type of account among the Dogon, where they say everything came from a tiny seed, like Digitaria, Po, right? And then from that, and we'll go into the details of some of those creation accounts from texts like the Pale Fox Conversations with Ogotomeli, that it talks about immediately after the Big Bang, there was what they refer to as plasma. It's not quite gas, it's not quite anything else, but it's like a fluidity of immense temperature, unthinkable types of temperatures. But when you're talking about this as quote unquote modern science, you have a similar conception going back to ancient Kemet in terms of in the beginning was this fluid, this liquid, and also in the text African philosophy, the Pharaonic period, Theophilo Benga also deals with this idea in the beginning accounts of water. So again, there's an idea that everything evolved from this original material. According to the Shabaka text, there's an animating force, and this is the Ba, the world soul, life force, soul, or breath within each being. And also there's an idea that all nature is endowed with an inherent life force potential, right? And we were talking about before, we were mentioning elks and wolves in Yellowstone National Park and how the ecosystem was unbalanced. But basically what we're dealing with is that everything that seems to be not have animate life in it, it can be transformed into something that does have animate life in it. So here's a willow tree, here's whatever, it's not walking around, but that can now become part and parcel of what becomes a baby elk. These things can transform from one form to another. So in terms of divinities and creation, divinities are seen as spirit forces by which man and woman are able to call supernatural forces to assist in ultimate life's purpose, to realize one's destiny. And even, we look at some of these things etymologically when we're talking about spirit. We mentioned before, it has the same root as respiration, inspiration, perspiration. The same spirit is in it. And it comes from a root of idea dealing with breath, right? Which, as we saw among various African cultures, that's just one aspect of the human being. So in Yoruba, Emi is one aspect. And Chi Hong Hong, right? You have Bakan, which is the concept of life itself, and it's associated with the nose. So you have all these interconnected concepts and ideas. But when we talk about spirit, it's basically we're trying to fit all these various aspects of the human being, all various aspects of what we know, into a concept of basically what really is only discussing breath, which is only one aspect of the self. So if I translate home home into English, we'll translate that as spirit. If I translate sum sum into English, okay, that translates as spirit. If I translate Osamine into English, that translates as spirit. So basically, if we have a language that doesn't have this full multiplicity of concepts, then what we end up doing in trying to translate everything as this thing is that, again, the equal sign, the danger of the equal sign, where it can obliterate our indigenous concepts because we're trying to fit into a small package that has a lot of conceptual baggage even that comes with it. All right. Also, there's a parallel between the personal and the cosmic, right? And we'll go into what we're dealing with that. There are various myths of creation of the cosmos, which is analogous to creation of the human and vice versa. So when we're talking about Dikenga, for example, we're saying all things follow that type of pattern where it has a conception, a birth, a high point, a death, which is really a transition, and then back to conception. That you can look at the creation of Earth like that. You can look at the creation of the universe like that. You can look at the creation of a story like that. So I actually wrote an article that was dealing with that in the text from Nganga Fukiao, who was a practitioner of the system of the Bakongo, which is of course in Congo. He made a statement that all things follow this Dikenga cycle, right? Which is what we would call counterclockwise or anti-clockwise type of motion. So if he says all things follow that pattern, well, let's test it. Just like we're doing a science experiment. So let's see, here's a story. It has a conception of it as an idea. So, all right, that's covered. Then it has a birth, which is, I'm writing all the way up to, let's say, the outdooring, the naming ceremony, and that's where I'm, coming out public with my book. It goes through a stage, it becomes popular, the bestseller. If it's my book, let's hope it's a bestseller. Then eventually it may fall into disuse, in a library. Or, vice versa, it can inspire someone else to conceive an idea of another book. You understand? So all these things can follow the same type of pattern that we're discussing. So again, all these things are seen in parallel. So if I know how a human being is created, what ingredients did we need? We needed a man, we needed a woman. How did it go about? There was a gestation period, there was so forth and so on. If I know this, then I can abstract back to the beginning of creation. There had to have been a male and a female element. There had to have been this. There had to have been a womb type of thing. So once we know this, then we say, all right, the primordial waters, at the beginning there had to have been water because this is how it works now. So basically, you're looking at these things as an order that was established in the very beginning of all things and has stayed in place up to this time. And then you can also think about this in terms of, again, going to modern science. You think of physics, that some of these quote unquote physics laws have been the order that was established at the beginning and they're still in place. So whether we're talking about gravitational pulls, whether we're talking about electromagnetic things, whatever we're talking about, it's a similar type of conception of the order as it is now is the order as it was then. So if I know how this works, then by analogy I can abstract to how things must have been at that time. So social life is also seen as part of cosmology. Creation is not seen as an event in the remote past, but a continually evolving process of transformations from one state to another. So, how old are you? 25? Lisbeth, how old are you? 38? Okay. Ojabwan? Amadou Melanie? 52? Okay, you have us all beat. Me, I'm 37. Now, this is on one level we can look at our age in that sense. But if we understand as everything, so again, let's look at the Dogon concept of creation, which is basically analogous to what Eurasians refer to as a Big Bang concept. It means that everything started off in this teeny tiny seed and then expanded out from there. But the way things look now is not how things look like when they were all in this tiny seed this big. I'm bigger than even this seed that we're talking about, all things came from, according to the Dogon. So if that's the case, it means that everything has just transformed, right? So whether we're talking on the smallest level about atoms, electrons, neutrons, these things are not like just magically being created now. We're talking about a process of transformation. What we now refer to the earth wasn't always referred to as the earth and wasn't always one big mass, floating through space. All of these things have transformed to be what we now refer to them as. I hope you're following along. So if we understand that type of concept on a deeper level, we can look at everything really has the same age, right? If the universe itself and everything that came from this seed, then I hope you're following.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like, and in the beginning, in the creation stories, it talks about this primordial waters as a time of chaos. But in a sense, the way we are now, even though it's ordered, we could think of it as being an ordered type of system, all these physics laws or whatever we're talking about. But in a sense, it obscures this type of relationship that all things are really just one thing. And we're just different manifestations and transformations of that one thing, right? So it's a different way of looking at it. But in that sense, it's a bit chaotic now because I think I'm 37, I think you're 38, you think you're 25. But in a let's not say deeper, in a different way of looking at it, we could say we're all the same age coming from this exact same seed. Now, my Kikongo teacher used to say, mono inging, ganging, 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 ganging. And in saying that, he was saying, I am a seed of 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 a seed, continuing on. So again, it's an idea of looking at everything that we are as just different transformations of the same thing. And it puts into perspective when, for example, in Kemet, the ruler would be called Sa-Ra, which is son of the sun. Now, I remember looking at a series of documentaries called Cosmos, and in it, it was hosted by Neil deGrasse Tyson, an astrophysicist. And he was saying what, he was saying was very profound, and, it is. He was saying, on a deeper level, we're all made of stardust, right? Basically the same thing that we're made of is the same thing that stars are made of, and everything else, we're just different manifestations of that. If you go to the coffin text, Book of Coming Forth by Day, we're talking about between 3,000 and 4,000 years ago, there's this concept that the creator is one, but whose arms are many. The Creator is one, but whose arms are many. So in that sense, I am one manifestation of this same thing that's just one thing. You're a different manifestation. So we look at all these various things as different arms of what is ultimately just one thing. And then we can also look at the divinities as a parallel type of situation, that this is yet one manifestation of what's really, one thing. And this is Chukwunyere Kamalu in the book talks about it as the oldest concept of monotheism. Now it's a monotheism that allows for various manifestations, just as it's talking about. When we talk about Akhenaten, we're talking about a more recent version, which is an exclusionary type of monotheism. We'll say everything is one and nothing else is allowed to exist. It's that. Aten, the solar disk and things of that nature. But we'll go into these things. So again, divinities are seen as spirit forces by which a man or woman may be able to call supernatural forces to assist in ultimate life's purpose, to realize one's destiny. There's a proverb in Chi, which translates to, if you have something that you want to say to the supreme being, say it to the wind. Right? So speak to the wind. And again, it's seeing like the wind itself is an intermediary that connects you to everything. And when we're thinking about everything, we have to expand our understanding of what the everything is. Because to be omnipresent, omniscient, and all these things, you hear this in the various names for the Supreme Being in different African cultures. So when they say Enya Sombia in Chi, that is the one who doesn't select a place of worship. That's a praise name for this one that we're referring to. That's the idea of omnipresence. That's not just one spot inside of this house only. This is the place that this creator of all things lives. So you have to go to this little spot. The idea is that the wind, by metaphor, is all around us. So if you want to, access everything, that's the way to do it, is through this intermediary that surrounds us all. But when we're talking about all, think about the furthest star in the sky that you can think about, right? Whatever teeny tiny point of light that you can barely even see, even with aided vision, right? That all includes that. So if you want to appeal to the all, you're talking about everything, including that tiny star plus that tiny plus everything, right? And then we have to think about not only that light that's come to us for however many billions of years it took for it to come down and hit our eye at this specific time that we're looking at. We also have to think about the light that went in the other direction. You understand? So when we're talking about the all, we're talking about something very big. So if I want to touch or if I want to communicate with everything, it may be difficult in my body to do that. My hand can't reach that far. But what if I can have some type of assistance, whether through the wind or through one of these other manifestations? Then that opens up the possibilities of me accessing everything through an intermediary. So again, we mentioned that creation is not seen as an event in the remote past, but continually evolving process of transformations from one state to another. So this is a very key concept. So again, we're looking at creation as an analogy where each day is seen as a replay of creation of the world. And you find this in the great hymn to Aten by Akhenaten, where he talks about, this is like birth. When you start to rise, that's where these birds start to chirp and animals start to stir, so forth and so on. And each life is seen as a replay of each day. So we have our conception, which is like the sun at midnight. We have our birth, which is like sunrise. We have our high points, which is like middle age, whatever that is. We have our death or transition period. And then let me ask you a question. When the sun sets, does it stop existing? It's not rhetorical. I want to know your answer. Exactly, it doesn't stop existing. So if you see the human being as being a living sun, and this is a concept that you find in the Congo and other places, and you'll find it in various idioms throughout various African cultures. So in Yoruba, for example, Oku lo songongon. You're saying this person died at songongon. This is like at high noon. So you're looking at, the person's life as a metaphor for the day. It means that I was here in the morning, right? Arojo, which is the morning of one's life. And that's how you talk about childhood as an idiom, right? So I was here and then I got here and then I passed on. So I died in the high noon. That means I didn't get all the way to the evening. You have the same thing in Chio. It say Wanyaneria, right? So it's the person died here at the afternoon. It means that they didn't get all the way through their life to go through this. So you find it. There's a song by the Commodores, I think. Yes, the Commodores, The Night Shift, and it's talking about Marvin Gaye saying, "We know you're still singing your song on the night shift." So you still have this concept of when you pass away, you're basically just in night, and then you're waiting for your sun to rise again. So these are concepts you find all throughout throughout the African worldview. Now, last year, an elder friend passed on, and on his program, it said his sunrise was on this date, his sunset was on this date. Now, no one's telling them, oh, you have to do it like this because that's the African worldview or whatever. It's just a very logical extension, and this is what we find here. So each life is seen as a replay of each day. We all have these stages in our life, and that's what we started off talking about, are these different stages in initiation, where you go from first your initiation into even being conceived, up to your initiation into the world, through your various initiation stages. So you come of age, and you have your formal initiation as an adult. You come to be initiated into parenthood. You can get another initiation as an elder, perhaps by getting a title or some type of esteemed role. Then you get initiated into the ancestral realm. You have those same stages throughout. So the image of the sun dispelling darkness is the image of the demiurge Ra, rising out of the primordial waters to create the world. And this is what you have in various creation stories, is the sun as the metaphor and the human being as the living sun. So it makes sense to refer to the ruler as the son of the sun, on a scientific level, what we're talking about. But then also we're dealing with an analogy and extended metaphor. And this mirrors evolution of human consciousness as well, right? So as you grow in consciousness, these things are seen as being also parallel, a birth stage, a continued other stages that we've just mentioned. And you have stories of Atum Ra in creation accounts, which is analogous to development of the egg in amniotic fluid to embryo to newborn with first sensations and emotions. And you have this idea of an egg of creation. In the Dogon, you have that idea of creation as metaphorically like an egg. So again, you're extending this analogy. So we talk about organization and disorganization of the universe, that the universe is organized by a demiurge or divine intelligence from the chaos of the primeval waters, right? And you can think about this demiurge and primeval waters as a metaphor for the male phallus and the womb. So you have, again, the masculine and the feminine coming together in order to do what? To have creation. But this is another aspect of thinking about it. If we see it in that way, as in the beginning was a womb, and in the beginning was this demiurge, which is represented in some cultures as a mound that came up into the waters, which is a very clear metaphor for what we're talking about, or as the sun coming up in the waters, or whatever we're dealing with. Then, all right, here's a womb. In these creation stories, that's where we start off with, but we know to get a womb that's capable of creating something, that woman who has that womb had to have gone through being born and getting up to that stage of maturity. I hope you're following. So we're saying that this is metaphorically like a womb, but this, to be a womb that's capable of creating something, you yourself had to have come out of a womb. And before that, that one had to come out of a womb. Before that one had to come out of a womb. We're talking about Ra as a demiurge, all right? To have that demiurge that, sparks this series of events that go into creation, that one had to have come from something, So what we're dealing with is we're going into, we talk about the Dogon story of the series of creation events. This one, it didn't come out right, so it had to be done again, and so forth and so on. That it's a concept of before a Big Bang, right? That there had to have been something, if we're talking about, we're saying metaphorically, this is what happened. to even grow to a point of a masculine and feminine that's capable of bringing about creation of life, they had to have come out of something to even get to that stage. I hope everyone's following along. Good. So this is just food for thought. Also, a person's destiny is chosen from a chaos of possibilities by the spiritual double or destiny. This is what we were talking about when we were dealing with divination. So you have 256 different combinations, plus some in terms of God signs and other master signs, things of that nature, if you're dealing with the Yoruba or the Dogon. So even as you're doing a divination, there are all these possibilities that can come out. And you can think about, we showed you this Akwele Ifa. So you have this double helix where you have any possible combinations that can come out of this 8. And you can think about this also in terms of DNA, which is also a double helix, which the Dogon talk about, a spiraling ladder, right? So you have this one, if this gene is switched on and this one is switched off, you'll have one type of output. That will be you're handsome. Switch it a different way, now you're not so handsome, whatever the output is, that you have all these possibilities that could come out. So you have a chaos of possibilities, but all of them are ordered into what comes out to be you, right? Also, the mythical agent of chaos is the master of language and also the keeper of the word in various African cultures. We were just talking about Ishu, right? Life force and ultimate knowledge. And in many cultures, including the Dogon, greed leads to a denial of means of fully utilizing the power of that word. So they possess the word, they own the word, they're the caretakers or keepers of the word, but because of various things, they may be restricted from utilizing that. Again, that's talking about the Dogon case. There's an idea that every being is gifted with a mission, a destiny in the form of the word, right? And again, we find this throughout various African cultures. Now we come to life on earth. So you've gone through your conception, through your creation, and through social conditioning, lack of development, and greed. This can prevent individuals from fully realizing and manifesting their fullest potential, or vice versa. But we're talking about here we have your destiny life's path, and you may ask the question, well, does everyone reach their fullest potential? Not necessarily in one lifetime, but there are multiple opportunities to do that. The earth and ancestors are central in sanctioning laws of the human community, right? So this is how famine, all these types of things would be interpreted, as we need to be back in balance with earth, nature, and things of that nature. So even we were talking about climate change and global warming, all these things, we can see it as a literal thing that we're living through, extinction of various species, some that we're living through that's actually vindicating what our ancestors have said. If you behave in these specific ways, it can have repercussions. Causes have effects is the basis of this type of thinking. So therefore, it's crucial to live in balance with the earth to avoid retribution from nature in the form of natural events, floods, droughts, famines, pestilence, and so forth and so on. So yesterday we looked at a documentary, The Man Who Stopped the Desert, and it was talking about how the desert kept encroaching in Burkina Faso. He ended up resurrecting an ancient technique of zai holes, which are very deep. They put manure in them, and with that, the water, whenever it does come, is able to stay in there, and is very good for planting crops, for planting trees. So he ended up going from a place that was completely desert, like a moonscape, like you're walking on the moon, to a place that has forests, right? So the causes have effects. If people kept doing things as they were doing, people were just leaving abandoned and say, oh, the soil is no good, you can't do anything. But again, you see that if you are not taking care of the earth, then it leads to famine and all these things that were coming out. But when he started taking of the earth, then you got a different type of effect from that. Right? And then again, the human being is seen as an organic part of the earth on a micro scale, and the supreme being is seen as being on a macro scale. So we're dealing with order, and we're talking about the feminine concept of ma'at. Has everyone heard of ma'at? Ma'at. Okay. So ma'at is a feminine principle which usually in shorthand deal with truth, justice, righteousness, harmony, balance, order, reciprocity as 7 guiding cardinal virtues. But there are also generations of innocence, as they're referred to, where the person, when they pass on, they have to say all these 40, this is what we talked about last week, you have to say all these 42, and then when you're vindicated, then you would be pronounced as Ma'at Keru, which is true of voice. So Ma'at is seen as representing central forces that regulate spiritual, social, political, and economic organization. Now, we're dealing with the link to the earth, but again, as we saw in the documentary yesterday, that colonialism severed the link to the land for many. And we also saw it in the documentary on Tuesday about Wangari Maathai, where the British came, burned forests, cut them down, and said, we are having you do a monocrop culture, you're planting tea from now on. Finish. To the point where people were planting tea all the way up to their doorsteps. They forgot how to even plant gardens, to depend on themselves. So then you're in a situation where you have to go to the market in order to get whatever you need to eat. So when you're in that situation, now you become entirely dependent upon what you need to buy at the market. So your link to the land, to the earth, has been severed. And remember, the earth is where you bury all your ancestors. So it's a multi-pronged attack, because they also will tell you all this ancestor worship you're doing is bad, stop doing it. So also you're severed from your connection to the earth by severing you from even your concept of dealing with your ancestors. However, it's possible to reestablish a link with Ma'at and the earth as an organizing concept. There's an emphasis here on balanced, reciprocal, harmonious, orderly, appropriate, truthful, just human relations, and a relationship with nature, right? So this is what we're talking about when we're talking about order and sustenance of that order. So in terms of divinity and nature, we find this in ancient and traditional accounts of the beginning, dealing with Kemet, for example, Bambara of Mali, Yoruba of Nigeria, Kuba of Zaire, what's now Congo DRC, Dogon of Mali. At the time that the book came out in its first edition, it was Zaire still. The form of Benin, Igbo of Nigeria, Sonye of Zaire, Congo DRC. Now what you find amongst these, and again, this is hardly an exhaustive list, but you find some of the same core elements in terms of worldview in some of these, that you find that they are widely varied, yet they have common core elements which are discernible. Also, they are complementary. A complementary comparative research method helps to provide a more complete picture rather than an atomic analysis. Now, I just got done with an article where, I think I mentioned this to you all last week. I'm looking at different one. So I may not have. Actually, I don't think I did, because I just came up with the idea like a day or two ago. If you're dealing with different texts, you can have an intertextual analysis. So your understanding of this text can help to mutually illuminate this text, and vice versa. That's the mutual illumination. Now, people in literature, they talk about intertextuality, they talk about mutual illumination, but there's not very much substance to it. So in this article, I'm saying when you're dealing with mutual illumination, let's look at the root of that analogy. What things in nature actually mutually illuminate each other, right? Literally do that. And we can look at stars that do that, right? So you have binary star systems, which are equally, if not more, common than single star systems like the sun that we're in. So if you're looking at this, you can see that this star shines light on this star, and this star, by the same token, shines light on this star. But that's not the only interaction that they have. There's also issues of gravitational pull. So if you see that both of them are orbiting a common barycenter, as it's called, that from this you can say that this is like sharing a common theme. They're not touching each other, but they stay revolving around a common theme. You can also look at how stars, they can overflow what's called their Roche lobe. So their mass comes beyond where their gravitational pull is able to sustain. So therefore what comes beyond that, it then dissipates into space, and it can get caught up into the gravitational pull of another star. And this is what's called what's called the algol paradox. You have where a smaller star is further developed along its line of evolution, right? Well, it's like, okay, when we know bigger stars, they go through their evolutionary processes faster than smaller stars, then how come the smaller star is further along its path of evolution than the bigger star? And what's happening is exactly this. It's giving up its mass even though it's going through its evolutionary process, is giving up its mass to what becomes a bigger star, right? So saying that, we're saying that from this text can donate, core elements in terms of style, in terms of repetition, in terms of parallelism. If I'm making a new poem based on your poem, it's like I'm taking mass from your star and adding it to my, star that I'm doing. So just basically looking at all these different interactions between binary or multiple star systems and seeing how they're related to interactions between various texts, right? So when you do that, now you can use all the language that's appropriate for astrophysics and apply it to your textual analysis. Oh, when these two stars are around a common orbit, that's like two texts, revolving around a common theme, or this one is pulling, or they're exchanging mass, right? We can look at this in terms of my understanding from this one and this one is enriched, where if I only look at this one isolated in an atomic analysis, I may miss something that I may get if I see it in comparison with this star. And this is actually how different things are calculated about single stars, is because when you can see, all right, because of this eclipsing, that tells us something about even the single star. But anyway, just saying that when you look at these things comparatively, sometimes it can help, as opposed to just looking at this as Yoruba people do that, that's it. All right, but why do they do that? You may get more clarity if maybe you look at another culture that does things slightly differently, and then it will help you understand the single even better. So here we're looking at Kemet as a representative of the Nile Valley, including traditions that originated further in the interior of Africa and passed through rather than originated there in Kemet. And again, Kemet translates to what? Do we know? Good. What does it translate to in the indigenous language itself? Right, exactly. So when you're saying Kemet, you're saying when you have this determinative, you're talking about land. Oh, wrong thing. No. When you're looking at this determinative, and if it will go back for us. Right? When you look at this determinative here, you're talking about land of black people. But if you change this determinative to a man and a woman, you're talking about people who are black. So again, this is what we're talking about in terms of coming further from the interior. So others may be independent of Nile Valley expressions, but there are similar core elements manifesting from a shared worldview. So you can look at the worldview itself and the various manifestations that we call this cultural linguistic group as, again, we're talking about one was overall just one thing, but there are many arms of it, many transformations or manifestations of it. So some of the common elements include the emergence of the world from the primeval water or matter or morass. Among the Kuba of Congo, like in Unu, that's what's called Heliopolis, there's an account of a creator, a demiurge from the primeval waters that brings forth the world from the mouth. So again, these are common elements. Among the Bambara, they talk about a voice from the void, where the word materializes into the world. Where again, you have this idea that the word itself is vibration. You're talking about vibration of the vocal cords. For you to hear me, you're talking about this vibration as air is passing through, and depending on how these shake, the frequency, how fast they shake, whether they're stiff or lax, that is going to determine the sound that comes out. And again, we find this primeval creative vibration of the Bambara and the Dogon.
I have a question about
Mhm.
the word.
Mm-hmm.
How do I understand it in this particular context? I mean, I understand that the word is a vibration,
Mm-hmm.
but is that it, or is it also? Does it? I try to understand it from a non-linguistic point of view.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we'll go through this in time, but in the Dogon creation story, they say in the beginning was a void, right? And from this void came Gla, right? And Gla is the uncreated principle of continuous creation. The uncreated principle of continuous creation. And again, this
Sounds
comes.
like eternity.
You could think of it like that, right? So as we're talking about, creation wasn't just something that was back in the day. Every time you have a child, that's a continuation of creation. We can see this. Every time you see a new star in the sky, you're just seeing it, but it had to have been there for a billion years. You're just seeing the point of light come into your eyes. You're talking about creation, creation, creation. So it says in the beginning was Gla, and then full of its own emptiness, it was basically lonely, and it decided to scream out Dia. So now you have Gla, and its voice is now its partner. So this one has become two. Then you have Gladia. Then from that came Zo, came other aspects. And what you think about is, if you're familiar with processes of cellular division, so you start off, you don't have to be. You start off with, let's say a fertilized egg. The sperm is inside. So this one zygote becomes what? It splits and becomes two. The two becomes what? 4. The 4 becomes 8. The 8 becomes 16. You see this just like we were talking about in the divination systems. You see this in binary code. So this, multiplication, so forth and so on. So when you're thinking about the word, we'll actually go into that creation story, because that's the one that really emphasizes the word. But as here you have this creation, this creative principle of continuous creation that was not created itself, but to create its double, it did that through a voice from the void, right? And now the voice is its double, just like we're saying. So now I'm here and my voice is here. Now we have 2. Now from that 2 can come 4, and so forth and so on. So it's basically the equivalent of talking about the demiurge, that which got this whole thing, rolling. And you can think about this in terms of, if we're talking about the Dogon creation story, of their concept of the Big Bang. So you start off with 1, but think about the rapid multiplication that would be required to expand everything out to the size of the universe that we know now. So you can think about this again in terms of this rapid expansion, just like how this zygote becomes 2, 4, so forth and so on, that has to happen very, very quickly to expand everything out. We're speeding out at the light at multiple light years, whatever that is. And it's even thought that from this single point that it had to expand out faster than the speed of light. Because, or let's say here you have this, but now it's expanding out on either side, that this expansion has to go faster than the speed of light. It has to be going from here to here quicker than how light can go, because this light from here, it can't travel back and hit that side. It's too slow to hit the other side of what's moving away. I hope you're following along. Are you following along? So here we have an expansion, and this expansion, let's say, is happening at the speed of light. That this light is now moving in this direction. This light is also moving in this direction. Now, this point of light, picture it like a light bulb. The light that's here on this side can't travel fast enough to reach the light that's already gone from this center point, because this is faster. This is already moving in that direction. So this light can never, it's just light, so light can shine in all directions, but this light can never go fast enough to get to where the light on this side has already gotten to, right? But anyway, we're talking about, this expansion from the single point and how it's coming about. So that's how the word is talking about this, like demiurge, this thing that gets this creation started, where now everything starts expanding out from there.
Yeah, but I still don't know why would we use the word then? Why wouldn't we use the word light? Why wouldn't we use the word vibration? Why wouldn't we use the word creation? Why would we use the word?
Because the first thing that happened was an utterance, and the utterance was dia. That's what Gla said, and that's a word. So they're even telling you what the word was. So the word that Gla called out was dia.
And that means?
I don't speak Bambara. I have a friend who does those, so next time I see him, I'll definitely ask him, what is dia in Bambara? Right. But I'm sure it's something. This is the first word. It talks about Zo, and again, I think it mentions this in the account, the Bambara account that's in the book, where it says Zo is purposive thought, and the other things that, like, each one has a translation, but just because I don't know Bambara, I can't just rattle it off to you per se. All right, so human beings emerge in 4 primordial elements: earth, water, fire, and air. And this is seen as akin to the 4 cardinal directions. And they also occur as 8 male and female twins, and we'll find this in the creation story, one of the creation stories of Kemet. You also find it amongst the Dogon and others. It incorporates the doctrine of complements, where this one completes the other one, right? Duality and twinness of being. You have this idea also in the tree proverb. They say, "Vyasi yatanu benu benu," which translates to "the world we live in it by twos," right? Among the Basongye, they talk about 8 primordial beings emerging from a creator as elements or powers of nature through the use of symbols of earth, water, fire, and air. In the original existence of an androgynous being containing both sexes, even primordial water exemplifying this. And also there's a common element in terms of the primeval mother and father separately or incarnate within a single being. So in some creation stories it says there was a masculine and feminine. Each one has their own names. In some it says this is a masculine element that has a womb, or this is a feminine element that has a phallus, or the semen came out of the woman. These types of things that are very, it lets you know it's not only one. This is what we're getting at when we were talking before about, here I have an entire universe, and we're in this universe, or we have let's bring it down to a galaxy. So I'm in this galaxy, you're in the galaxy. So is this galaxy that we are a part of male or female? When we're talking about it, where both males and females are contained inside of this bigger thing. So it would be difficult to say this galaxy is only male or only female. It's a creative force that has both contained inside of it. So the morass of earth is mixed with water, and we're talking about basically, picture something like a swamp, right? It's not fully soil, it's not fully water, but you have them being mixed together. And you find similar accounts in the Yoruba, Igbo and Fawn accounts, and there's an idea of a level of chaos in the beginning. This chaotic mixture is organized and separated into water, land, seas, rivers, mountains, and hills. So basically the earth that's contained in it is separated, the water that's contained in it is separated, and now they become what we now know as the earth, that has water elements like the ocean, that has land elements like what we're on right now. In the Dogon, Igbo, and Yoruba accounts, there's an idea of a blacksmith who has a role of drying up the primeval marshes or morass. In the Fawn account, you have a chaotic soil-water mixture that has a fragile stability which will collapse if not held by the spiraling coil and motion of the serpent incarnation of the demiurge Da Ayudo Fredo. And in this, you're thinking about, as we were showing you, Auradi Nyokopon, which is a feminine and masculine, that again is talking about a spiral. You find a recurrence of this idea of a spiral, specifically a snake, represented as a snake, but you have this idea of a spiral as being central in this creation account. You find the same thing in the Dogon, that when out of this primordial egg, creation came out in spiraling motion. You have the similar thing in Angola. So if you see people who are doing capoeira, which is an African combat science, the reasoning behind all the spiral motions is because when you move in a spiral motion, you're imitating the original motion of creation, which is moving in a spiral. Then you can, abstract it out to how our hair spirals, DNA spirals, all these things that have life in it, they have this spiraling type of motion. So the spiral motion is a motion of life and symbol echoed in Dogon myth that I was just mentioning about. So the serpent as a symbol of immortality and continuity, also the serpent as a symbol of life force in the form of a spiral and a coil. Now, when I went to Kemet last year, I actually took a picture of it was actually like a mural that was done in gold, and on it had this picture of a snake biting its own tail. And you find this exact same image in modern day Benin, where this is what we're talking about right now, Da Aido Huedo, which is a snake that has its own, which is coiled and has its own tail in its mouth. And this is a symbol of eternity, right? And this is also what we find in, for example, the week or the month among the Akan, where the first and the last day are the same day. So this Kwasyada is the beginning of the week and it's the end of the week, the exact same day as both. And this day, Akwasi is the beginning of the month and the end of the month, the exact same day. There's not a point where you say, all right, now this is the beginning, this is the end. It's just the day itself has both of those roles. I want to see if I can actually pull that up for you. All right, this is it. So this is, you see here at the head and at the legs, this is a snake. Let me enlarge it small. So this is dating back 3,000 plus years, but you find the exact same thing that you find in modern day Benin. You have a snake with its own tail in its mouth, and again representing these similar concepts of eternity. So you find that at the head, and also you find the same thing at the feet, right? And I think I have one of the one that you find in Benin as well.
Why is there one on the top and
That's a good question. Why do you think?
maybe that's comes from as above as below.
I think that's a good idea. When we think about the concepts of as above, so below, what is that referring to? Or where can we find examples of that?
Oh, in histology,
Mm-hmm.
when it's happening in the cosmic,
Mm-hmm.
it's also happening there.
Right. So very good. And we gave examples of that just in terms of precession of the equinoxes and various ages. So during the age of the bull, the aspect of the nation that was represented by the bull was the one that was in power. When you shift to the age of the ram, you go to Waset. So you go from Ilnu, Heliopolis, to the center of power, shifting to those who have the ram as their symbol, which is the town of Amen, that's Waset. As you come to the age of the fish, now you have the rise of this fish religion. I thought I had the image of the one from Benin, but I may not have it in here. But I think that's a very valid way of looking at it, because when you're thinking about as above, so below, you're talking about what you see here. You see a mirror image of it, down here. Let's continue. So with this, there's a primeval chaos that exists and it's organized into a sustained order. This is an interplay of the complements of order and chaos. And also this agent of organization, there's also a counter agent that's working to destabilize the orderly evolution of the universe. Right, so you have the Nomo, who are working to put things in order, but then you have Ogo, who is working to destabilize things. You have Ifa, that's working to put things in order. You have Eshu, who is also destabilizing things. but it's not seen as bad that this is being destabilized. It's seen that these are complements. You can't have chaos without order and vice versa. You can't have this without that. So here we're talking about the serpent as a symbol of immortality and continuity, also a symbol of the life force in the form of a spiral and a coil. So we're dealing with the interplay of complements of order and chaos. And also creation is seen as an ongoing phenomenon rather than a discrete event of a remote past. There's organization and counter-organization, and they constitute the nature of the cycle of life, development, and progress. There's conflict and there's disorganization. There's reorganization and resolution. There's redevelopment and progress, and all of these are seen as complementary, all necessary to make the whole. Now, last week I was somewhere, and somehow African concepts of creation came up. So I started going into all this, and there was a woman who was there. We hold fast to the Adam and Eve story, and so forth and so on. Now, at one point in my life, I would have tried to continue sharing something to somebody who was obviously closed. Like the way she was saying is like, we hold fast to this, we hold fast to So, I actually had somewhere to go really. But I shook her hand and said, okay, thank you, and left. So I was very proud of myself for just the discipline of, it would have had as much effect for me talking to the wall and trying to explain the concept to the wall. Actually, that may have had more effect because, the wall may accept the vibration and it may stay lodged in there or something. But again, we're talking about foundations of African thought. You have somebody who is telling you, I'm not interested in African thought per se. I'm interested in what I got through the Bible. That's all I'm interested in. So it's like you can say, this is what African people have said about it. If you want to follow it, fine. If you don't want to follow it, fine. But I'm just giving you information. But anyway, the cycle of life shows that evolution of the universe on a cosmic scale is a reflection of the evolution of a human being, and this is what we're talking about. If you know how the human being evolves, then you know how the universe evolves. You start from the known, and then you abstract into the unknown, perhaps. So this cycle is seen as an ascending spiral in the development of a person. We also have, quote-unquote, modern stories of the role of DNA in the development of human beings. If you read Conversations with Ogo Tembele, he's describing DNA for you without going to a microscope or electron, whatever he's looking at. He's telling you this is how it works. A double helix spirals like this. He's talking about from this egg, it comes out in a spiral. And it deals with the conflict of identity and life leading to a reassessment of direction and purpose. And we were talking about this in terms of number, destiny, and divination in the last class. So let's say something that on the surface seems very bad. You have a near-death experience or whatever, and it makes you think, you know what? I need to stop drinking. So you had something that's a brush with death. You feel like I'm about to die. You're about to have a heart attack. But from that, it can lead to a reorganization. So then chaos can bring about something orderly. When the conflict is resolved, this can be a move to progress until the next conflict and resolution, akin to ascending a spiral symbol, returning to the same point as a higher level of experience and understanding. So you can look at the Dikenga as moving through. Now it's interesting that also the solar system is thought of as moving in that type of manner. So the solar system here is the galaxy that we're in, the so-called Milky Way. You have the solar system at a branch of this Milky Way. Now, as the planets are going around the sun, it's still moving throughout the galaxy, and it will keep doing that, keep doing that, keep doing that, until it comes to the same point. But the galaxy itself is also moving as it's doing this. So you have microcosms in macrocosms where you have what's happening on a smaller level also happening on a larger level. And this is, again, speaking to what you mentioned before in terms of as above, so below. That if you understand how it happens on a macro scale, you can understand how it happens on a much smaller scale, even going into an infinitesimal scale, where you talk about electrons orbiting and things of that nature.
Yeah, some people even say that that's actually the cause of climate change, not
Mhm.
human behavior, but
Mhm.
the fact that the galaxy is moving.
I'll we were just discussing this before, just in terms of the wobble of the earth, and the last time